There comes a moment in every woman's life when she finally wakes up and feels the truth in her whole being. Not just as a thought, but in her body, her nervous system, her energy. And that truth is simple yet life-changing. Your worth is not up for debate. It doesn't rise or fall because of what someone thinks about you. It doesn't disappear because someone failed you, ignored you, or hurt you. It doesn't shift because you walk through a rough season, a breakup, a loss, or a moment that shattered you. Worth is not something you earn. It is something you already hold. A woman who knows she is a queen is not playing by the same rules as everyone else. She isn't trying to prove who she is. She isn't waiting to be chosen, validated, or finally apologized to. Deep inside, she knows her strength doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from within. And that inner shift, when a woman stops chasing approval and starts standing in her own certainty, that shift changes everything. But let's talk about what really happens inside, in the brain, in the body, in the spirit. When you grow up believing your worth depends on conditions, on how you look, what you achieve, or how others treat you, your brain builds a survival pattern. You become extra alert to rejection, comparison, and criticism. Your nervous system starts acting like the world outside of you holds all the power. So you either shrink or stretch yourself too far just to feel accepted. You run after validation because you were convinced your worth is something that moves around. And when that becomes your autopilot, you start reacting to life instead of shaping it. Now here's something deeper. Your brain cannot tell the difference between real experience and a strongly imagined one. That's neuroplasticity. This means you can rewrite your sense of worth by shifting your inner world, by becoming the woman who refuses to negotiate with self-doubt. Every time you imagine yourself stepping into a room with calm, steady confidence, every time you decide not to take someone's disrespect personally, because you know it's their wound, not yours, you carve a new path inside you. A queen's path. When you start embodying your worth, your energy changes long before your life does. You stop chasing closure from people who were never meant to hold your heart. You stop explaining yourself to people who want to misunderstand you. You stop tying your value to productivity or perfection. And you start choosing silence not to hide, but to remember yourself without the noise of pressure. This isn't arrogance. It's alignment. It's coherence between who you truly are and how you finally show up. A woman in coherence becomes magnetic, not because she tries, not because she shines loudly, but because she's real, she's grounded. She glows from a place she didn't borrow from anyone. And people feel it. You cannot fake that kind of energy. It appears when you release the lies you learned and replace them with truth. Not surface level truth, but truth that reaches your identity. You begin to understand that the people who overlooked you weren't measuring your worth. They were revealing their limits. And the moment you stop making those limits personal, you rise. Not because you think you're above others, but because you refuse to abandon yourself again. You stop squeezing yourself into places too small for who you're becoming. You stop defending people who don't know how to treat a woman with a crown. The world will try to convince you to earn your value by working harder, pleasing everyone, or shrinking so others feel comfortable. But that isn't sovereignty. Sovereignty says, I was born worthy. I don't hustle for it. I don't beg for crumbs when I was born to build my own table. And if someone can't see me, that's okay. I finally see myself. There is a real shift that happens when you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. When you stop measuring your worth by likes, replies, or whether someone stayed, and you start living from the truth that you are already enough. Not because you did everything perfectly, but because your existence is no accident. Your voice, your presence, your power, none of it is up for negotiation. When you reach the place where rejection doesn't shake your peace, where your joy isn't dependent on approval, where your light doesn't dim because someone didn't notice it, you step into queen energy, not as a performance, but as your reality. You quit performing for acceptance and start living from alignment. And alignment feels like coming home to yourself. It feels like walking into a room with your head high, even if no one applauds, because you're not there to impress. You're there because you belong. The life you're living right now is not only shaped by what has happened to you, it is shaped even more by who you believe you are. Every action, every emotion, every choice is filtered through your identity. If your identity is rooted in fear, unworthiness, or limitation, then your energy will always move towards survival and protection. But the moment you choose to shift into the version of you who no longer lives, trapped in the old story, the moment you choose to embody the woman you're becoming, your energy changes direction, and so does your future. Most people try to change their life while keeping the same identity. They want new outcomes while thinking, feeling, and acting like their past self. That's why they stay stuck in familiar patterns that don't feel good anymore. Because the truth is this: you cannot create a new future while clinging to the emotions of the past. You can't sit on a throne while still believing you don't deserve a seat at the table. Identity is not just a label. It's the inner blueprint your brain and body follow. It's the silent instructions you give yourself about what you're worthy of, what's possible, and what kind of energy you allow into your life. If you've spent years identifying as someone who settles, who struggles, who is overlooked or underestimated, your nervous system gets used to that identity and begins seeking situations that match it. You end up living in a loop. Your identity creates your energy, and your energy creates your reality. So how do you shift? You begin by asking one powerful question: who am I becoming? Not as an idea, but as a feeling, a mindset, and energy. Can you see her? The woman who walks with confidence, speaks with clarity, and doesn't need to prove anything because she knows who she is. That version of you already exists as potential, waiting for your alignment. The more you think like her, feel like her, and act like her, the more your energy flows in her direction. That's why alignment isn't pretending. It's matching your inner world to the identity you're stepping into. That is when the old patterns start to fade and the brain begins creating new ones that support your growth. And the beautiful part is this: your brain is designed to change. It wants to change. But it only changes when you stop identifying with the version of yourself that was born from struggle and start identifying with the one born from vision. A queen doesn't rise by accident. She rises by alignment. She becomes magnetic not by chasing, but by being clear about who she is. She doesn't wait for life to place a crown on her head. She becomes the kind of woman the crown naturally gravitates toward. That kind of identity channels her energy into purpose, presence, and power. Your energy is your currency. You spend it every time you think a thought, feel an emotion, or choose an action. The real question is, are you investing in the identity you're outgrowing or the one you're stepping into? When your identity stays tied to the past, your energy keeps looping through old emotions: shame, fear, doubt. But when your identity aligns with your future, your energy expands into gratitude, calm, clarity, and inspiration. That emotional expansion is proof that you are becoming someone new. Real change doesn't begin with fixing your outer world. It begins with shifting your inner state. Because once you change on the inside, the outside eventually follows. You don't wait for life to treat you like a queen before you become one. You become her first. And then life rearranges itself to meet your new standard. Identity is a choice. It's not permanent. Every day you're either repeating the old you or building the new you. Your energy will always follow whichever one you choose. If you keep waking up repeating old emotions, retelling old stories, replaying old fears, you keep your energy loyal to a past version of yourself. But if you wake up and begin rehearsing a new emotion, a new belief, a new story, you tell your whole being, this is who I am now. That's the difference between wishing for change and becoming the change. A woman who only wishes stays in place. A woman who embodies her future self steps into that identity now. Her thoughts shift to match her vision. Her feelings begin to support her purpose. Her behavior starts to rise to her new level. And the universe responds to clarity, not confusion. You were never meant to live as a watered down version of yourself. You are here to grow, to expand, to rise into the version of you that matches the life you are capable of living. That means being more invested in who you're becoming than in who you've been. Let others define you by your past if they want. You're defining yourself by your potential. You're done accepting the identity shaped by trauma, fear, or old heartbreak. You're stepping into the woman you were always meant to be. You're creating something new out of choice, out of vision, out of your own strength. And as this new identity forms, your energy begins to move exactly where it's meant to go. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes she has spent more energy reacting to life than shaping it. She notices how she has been molded by circumstances, pushed around by expectations, and emotionally pulled by what others did or didn't do. Then one day, she finally sees the pattern. She sees how her nervous system has been trained to survive instead of rise. That moment of truth becomes the doorway to change, because you were never meant to only respond to life. You were meant to design it. When you live in reaction, you hand your power away. You let the outside world decide how you feel. If someone shows you love, you feel worthy. If someone pulls away, you crumble. If an opportunity arrives, you're excited. If it disappears, you question your value. In that state, your emotions become unstable, fragile, and dependent on things you cannot control. You stop being sovereign. You start being emotionally tied to people, situations, and outcomes that were never meant to control you. This reactive way of living is survival mode. It's how the brain and body operate when they sense danger. When you feel threatened, physically or emotionally, your system shifts into fight, flight, or freeze. Stress hormones rush through your body. Your awareness narrows. Your choices become quick and short-sighted. You start searching for safety, approval, or control in places that can't give it. Without realizing it, you stay stuck in a loop, reacting to the past while trying to build a new future. And that simply cannot work. Creation is different. Creation demands presence. It asks you to step out of old emotional habits and step into the energy of your vision. When you start creating your life instead of reacting to it, everything begins to shift. Not because the world becomes easier, but because the things that used to shake you no longer move you. You choose your responses instead of being controlled by them. You start initiating change instead of hoping for it. And most importantly, you stop handing your emotional well-being to people who should never have that kind of power over you. There's also science behind this. Your brain is a record of your past. It holds memories, emotions, and patterns that shape how you respond today. When you live in reaction, those old programs run your life. You wake up thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, repeating the same behaviors as yesterday. That loop reinforces the version of you that you're trying to grow out of. But when you become aware of the loop, you gain the power to interrupt it. Conscious creation begins with that decision. When you wake up and instead of letting the world set your mood, you connect with your future self. You align with the woman you're becoming, not the one you were trained to be. You generate your own emotional state. Peace, clarity, confidence, gratitude. Created from within, not borrowed from the outside. This is the beginning of mastery. This is when you influence your environment instead of reacting to it. A queen doesn't respond to chaos. She brings order to chaos. She doesn't chase approval. She approves of herself. She doesn't control people. She controls her energy. And it's not an act, it's regulation, it's healing, it's alignment. Because when you calm your nervous system and choose higher emotions no matter what is happening around you, you send a strong message to life: I am ready to create from the inside out. And this doesn't mean ignoring your pain or pretending you're fine. It means you stop letting those emotions drive your choices. You feel them, you honor them, you release them. But you don't build your life from them. Your future cannot grow from bitterness, fear, or resentment. It grows from intention, vision, and emotional clarity. Every time you pause before reacting, before sending that angry message, before shrinking in rejection, before acting from old wounds, you give yourself the chance to choose a new version of your life. That pause is sacred. It's the birthplace of transformation. In that tiny space between what triggers you and how you respond, you choose who you are becoming. Creation requires repetition. You can't think a new thought once or feel a new feeling for a few minutes and expect your life to change. You train your body and mind until they believe the new story, until your nervous system is no longer hooked on stress, until your identity no longer clings to struggle. That's when you become a creator. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You become the moment. The truth is, many people avoid creation because it requires responsibility. It asks you to stop blaming the world for your emotional state. It asks you to stop living like a victim of your past and start stepping into the role of the builder of your future. It's not easy, but it is necessary. Because until you accept that you are the source of your thoughts, your energy, and your reality, you will keep waiting for someone else to save you. A woman who chooses to stop reacting and start creating becomes powerful in the best way. She stops settling. She stops explaining herself. She stops shrinking to fit old stories. She becomes grounded. She becomes intentional with her words, her limits, her energy. She understands her attention is her most precious currency. What she focuses on grows. What she emotionally practices becomes who she is. What she creates in her inner world eventually shows up in her outer world. You don't create through force. You create through frequency. And your frequency is shaped by the emotions you live in every day. If you live in fear, you create more fear. If you live in worthiness, you create more abundance. If you live in alignment, you attract people and opportunities that reflect that alignment. Boundaries are not walls. They are standards. They are your way of telling the world what you allow into your mind, your space, and your heart. A queen does not beg for respect or argue about her value. She shows it through how she carries herself. She sets boundaries not from fear, but from deep self-respect. Boundaries are not made to push people away. They are made to protect your energy. Many people misunderstand this. They think boundaries are punishment, distance, or withdrawal. But boundaries are simply clarity. They mark what is okay and what is not. When a woman knows her worth, she no longer fears being misunderstood for having standards. She doesn't need to explain why she protects her peace. Her alignment is more important than being liked. And it's not because she believes she is above anyone. It's because she finally understands that she cannot give her soul away to keep others comfortable. When your boundaries are weak, your energy leaks. You get drained by conversations that lead nowhere, people who keep crossing lines, and situations that take more from you than they give. Without boundaries, your nervous system stays in low-grade stress. You become tense, overgiving, people-pleasing, and shape-shifting just to avoid conflict. But that isn't peace. That is self-abandonment disguised as harmony. Every time you say yes when your intuition is saying no, you tell yourself your voice doesn't matter. Every time you tolerate subtle disrespect, passive-aggressive remarks, inconsistency, emotional manipulation, you tell your subconscious that your standards can be pushed aside. And once your subconscious accepts that story, you begin to shrink. You tolerate things you once rejected. You adapt to dysfunction. You call chaos normal. You silence your discomfort just to avoid being judged or left behind. But the woman you're becoming, the queen within you, no longer looks for safety in silence. She finds safety in self-respect. She knows that boundaries are not ultimatums. They are invitations. They say, this is the level I live at. If you want to be here with me, rise to it. They aren't demands. They're expressions of identity. And identity shapes behavior. When you commit to your boundaries, you stop being pulled by guilt, fear, or loneliness. You move from principle, not pressure. That changes the way you move in the world. You stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand. You stop overworking in relationships that only survive because you're overgiving. You stop bargaining with your own intuition just to keep a connection alive. A queen does not need constant chaos to feel needed. She thrives on clarity, stability, and emotional freedom. Setting boundaries isn't about anger. It's about protection of your energy, your time, your presence, your peace. They are sacred. Not everyone should have access to them. Not because you're cold or unkind, but because you're clear. And that clarity becomes magnetic. When you honor your boundaries, the people who are meant for you will honor them too. And there's science here as well. When you hold your boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable, your brain starts linking self-respect with safety instead of danger. For many women, confrontation has felt unsafe because in the past, speaking up led to rejection, conflict, or emotional punishment. So the mind learned to associate boundaries with pain. But when you keep practicing, that wiring changes. You teach your brain that self-respect is not a threat, it's home. Every time you hold your line, every time you walk away from what disrespects you, every time you choose calm over chaos, you quietly teach your nervous system that you are safe when you stand with yourself. And that changes everything. Because once your body learns that honoring your standards is a safe place to be, your relationships shift. Your environment shifts. Your choices begin to match who you really are. You stop asking for permission to speak your needs. You simply voice them. And if someone can't meet you there, you don't lower your standard. You just understand they aren't meant to walk beside you. That kind of truth isn't cold. It's clarity. And clarity protects your purpose. Boundaries show the world how to treat you. If you keep accepting behavior that sits below your standard, you teach people that your energy is up for negotiation. But when you consistently live by your standards, when your words, your actions, and your decisions all reflect your worth, you create a new rhythm. People rise to meet you, or they drift away. Either way, it serves you because you're no longer building your life around the fear of losing someone. You're building it around the truth of who you are. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who chooses herself, not from ego, but from alignment. She stops letting fear decide her presence. She stops giving access to people who take advantage of her softness. She becomes intentional about who she allows near her, not because her heart is closed, but because she finally understands her energy is currency. She spends it with care. She gives it with love, but not without wisdom. And the more she lives from that place, the more her outer world mirrors the inner standards she refuses to abandon. Every boundary you set is a message to life itself that you are ready for people, opportunities, and spaces that match your frequency. Not because you're forcing anything, but because you're done entertaining anything that pulls you out of alignment. Boundaries aren't blocks against love. They're what make real connection possible. Because when you stand in your truth, only those who respect it can stay. Your outer world is always reflecting your inner state, not just your thoughts, but the level of regulation in your nervous system, the steadiness of your emotions, and the habits you've built in response to stress, uncertainty, and desire. If your inner world is chaotic, your outer life will show that same chaos. If your emotions are unsteady, your relationships will echo that instability. Life isn't reacting to your wishes. It's responding to your regulation. Emotional regulation is not about hiding your feelings or pretending to be calm. It's about learning how to feel without losing yourself. It's the ability to stay grounded even when everything around you shakes. Many women were taught to swallow their emotions to seem strong or explode when they've reached their limit. Neither path brings growth. True regulation means you can feel deeply without being controlled by the feeling. When you're regulated, you don't snap over small triggers. You don't spiral into fear at every unknown. You don't make rushed choices from emotional overwhelm. You pause. You breathe. You notice. You choose. And in that small space between what happens and how you respond, you create real power. Because power isn't loud. Power isn't force. Power is calm. Power is steady. Power is self-command. When a woman learns to guide her nervous system, she becomes unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because she becomes wiser in how she meets it. Your nervous system carries memories. It holds the echoes of every time you felt unsafe, unseen, unloved. And unless you break the pattern, it repeats those memories every time something reminds it of the past. That's why some moments feel bigger than they are. That's why some conversations feel heavier than they should. You're not always reacting to this moment. You're often reacting to emotions from long ago. That's why healing isn't just in your mind, it's in your body. You must show your body it is safe to respond differently. Regulation lets you stay connected to your values, even when your emotions want to take over. It lets you lead with clarity when fear tries to rush you. It lets you make choices from vision instead of desperation. And that steadiness becomes magnetic. People can feel when your energy is grounded. They trust it. They're drawn to it because most of the world is stuck in constant reactivity. When you are centered in your truth, you stand out without trying. This is where real transformation begins. When you regulate your emotions, you regulate your choices. And when your choices are no longer made from wounds or urgency, they become intentional. You start saying no to things that drain you. You stop running after people who confuse you. You stop abandoning yourself to be liked. Your emotional integrity shapes your environment. Your world changes, not because you control everything, but because you control yourself. You also begin to feel more flow. When you're regulated, your body isn't locked in survival mode. You have more access to creativity, intuition, presence. You can hold discomfort without fleeing. You can listen without defending. You can express your truth without collapsing into shame. That's when your energy moves toward growth instead of protection. And your reality responds. Opportunities become clearer. Relationships become healthier. Challenges become invitations instead of threats. Regulation is devotion. It's how you protect the woman you are becoming. It's how you stop repeating the cycles that kept you small. It's how you build a life that feels safe from the inside out. And only you can do this work. Only you can regulate your system. It's a practice, a choice, a daily return to center. Some days will feel simple. Some will stretch you. But every time you come back to your breath, your body, your truth, you reclaim the power you once handed away. Your reality is already listening to your regulation. It already mirrors your baseline. If you want peace outside, you must build peace inside. If you want respect from others, you must show it to yourself through the way you manage your energy. If you want emotional maturity in your relationships, you must bring emotional maturity to your own inner conversation. Nothing outside of you can stabilize what you refuse to stabilize within. A regulated woman isn't someone who never feels pain. She's someone who knows how to meet it, sit with it, and move through it without letting it take her under. That steadiness is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength. It means your past no longer rules your present. Your emotions no longer dictate your choices. Your energy is no longer scattered by old stories. Instead, it becomes whole, focused, intentional. And life has no choice but to rise to match that frequency. You are not here to live on autopilot. You are not here to shrink yourself to fit into broken systems or outdated expectations. You are here to remember who you are. A queen is not a title. It's a frequency. It's a level of self-awareness, emotional honesty, and energetic mastery that cannot be faked. It must be lived. You step into your queendom when you stop reacting and start creating. When you honor your boundaries not from fear, but from strength. When you decide that your peace, your vision, your alignment matter more than temporary comfort. You stop seeking validation from those who refuse to see your worth. You stop debating with your own intuition. You stop waiting for permission to live fully, speak clearly, and love boldly. And as you regulate your emotions, as you heal your nervous system, as you take responsibility for the energy you bring into every moment, you will see the world adjust to your new standard. Not because the world changed, but because you did. This isn't a performance. It's not about pretending to be something else. It's about removing every layer of conditioning that told you were less than, too much, or not enough. It's about reclaiming the truth that's always lived inside you. You are a queen. Start living like one.